we're in a world that's convinced that the truth must be simple. And all of these simple truths don't survive the collider that is modern social media.
So I don't disagree. The problem with a truth which is boundlessly complex is that functionally it's useless.
So that's what, and I'm so glad you made this point. That's the puzzle. We're now in a world where to do the nuance is to get yourself tangled because the internet is not friendly to nuance. On the other hand, to say something simply and crisply leads you into disappointing everyone who's believed in you. And, we were talking before a little bit about Christopher Hitchens.
Yes. Tell me about your thoughts on Hitch. I asked Sam this question. Sam spent a good bit of time with him. What would the modern culture be like if Hitch was still alive?
Hitch, I think, would have been forced to either self-incinerate or adapt. And I'm not sure which he would have done.
What's self-incineration in this context?
One of the things that makes Christopher Hitchens a hero to so many people, almost oddly a secular saint, if you will, is that he held the promise that one could simply stand in some place that was reasonable and hold forth from that simple perspective, like, yep, there is nothing to Islam. It is nonsense. It might be something he would say, or he might say, free speech is absolute, and you have every right to say anything you want, and I have every right to say, and the better ideas will prevail. Now you watch what's happened with Sam and this question of Trump. Sam perceives Trump to be an asymmetric existential threat and was willing to go and back the idea that the Hunter Biden laptop story might not have benefited the election. And he's lost an enormous number of people who otherwise agree with him. And now what's the reasoning? The reasoning, and something first time I met Sam, I went on his show to warn him that you can't just optimize for truth. You have to optimize. I said, I have 4 variables I can't live without: truth, meaning, fitness, and grace. So Trump is a fitness puzzle to Sam, which is if we allow Trump to destroy the country, in Sam's mind, then we've lost fitness. There's no point in being truthful. And then there's a question about what is the meaning? Do you destroy the meaning of a democracy when you hold back information? Maybe you do. Maybe it no longer feels like it's an actual democracy. And what is the graceful thing to do? What is the just and right thing to do? I am convinced that some of Hitch's positions were attractive because he was using his big brain to suggest that life could be lived simply. If we were just strong enough of character, if we were clear enough of thought, we could espouse something like free speech or reason, and it would be enough.
Without requiring that we hold it up to a higher power.
Or that, you get caught in some very serious situation where you're in an edge case. Free speech does not exist in an absolute form under American law. It just doesn't. When, we mentioned Miller versus California, which was a sort of a follow-on decision to Memoirs versus Massachusetts. You don't have a right to broadcast pornography because pornography does not enjoy First Amendment protection. Now, how do you discern that pornography doesn't? Well, the justices claim that it doesn't. And there's a 3-factor test for what is pornography, which was, I believe, attenuated under something called Memoirs versus Massachusetts, but that was not allowed to stand. You're not allowed to necessarily endanger troop movements by blabbing information in a war. You're not able to slander or libel. There are all sorts of adjustments to free speech. And when you come at one of these perspectives from an absolutist frame of mind, you have to hope that you're not going to meet the edge case. A good example for me was the Second Amendment. I noticed that many Second Amendment types took an absolutist perspective, saying the right to keep and bear arms will not be infringed and don't bother me about a well-regulated militia. I said, okay. I'm not going to talk to you about a well-regulated militia. My question is, should the Davy Crockett be sold at Kmart? And they would often say, well, what's the Davy Crockett? And I said, well, it's about a 100-pound personal nuke. Well, first of all, I was very flabbergasted that a lot of gun enthusiasts did not know that there was a personal nuke developed by the United States. But then immediately, many of them saw where this was going, which is, okay, if we're going to restrict personal nukes at Kmart, then you've got your foot in the door. The camel has its nose under the tent.
It's a difference of degree, not a difference of kind all the way down.
Exactly. So I think that personal nukes have to be sold at Kmart because the American population needs to keep parity with the American military. And then I say, well, do you realize what you just said? Do you realize that you've bounced out of your very simplified framework? They don't. And this is partially the problem, which is that if you can't talk about taste and trade-offs and balance, because it's all squishy, then you have all of these people running to these different ultra simplifications, none of which work.
There's a quote from one of my smartest friends, Gwinder. A dilemma of tweeting is that you're aware of exceptions and conditions to your statements, but can't include them without turning an elegant aphorism into a clunky mess. So you must choose between writing tin-eared garbage or getting torn apart by pedants in replies and quote tweets.
I've chosen to fail in a particular fashion. No, but this is really important. I'm failing. How about you?
Depends what your goals are.
Well, but my point to you is, I don't think we're meant to succeed here.
What's that mean? What's the criteria?
Was that a her?
What's the criteria?
No, sorry, the person who just said
Gwinder,
that.
no, a guy.
What he said was that you're aware of the trade-off and there's no way out of the trade-off. I believe that there are ways out, but they have their own problems. Once you start to understand all of the different forces that are arrayed against you, you realize that if somebody chooses to hyper-focus on various things, they can effectively destroy your credibility in general. And you brought up Wikipedia, and I wanted to talk about that. An interesting thing that's happening with Wikipedia is the difference between individual Wikipedia entries and Wikipedia entries on like a subject or a plant or a geographic place. So isn't it strange that if you were to look up, for example, pneumatic drill on Wikipedia, there'd be a huge technically accurate article about pneumatic drills.
What constitutes it? Who invented it?
Right. And then you look up Jordan Peterson, and I guarantee you it's going to be a war zone. And now you fuse these two things together, which is weaponized Wikipedia and factual Wikipedia. And this is like some really dangerous new object. And I always knew that Wikipedia, the genius thing that it was, had a finite shelf life because it made the fatal flaw of using authoritative sources as bedrock truth. What happens when trolls get access to bedrock sources? What happens when the State Department or the Department of Homeland Security or the intelligence community or people who hate you?
That was the headlines that happened after my episode on Joe's show. It was the weekend that somebody had nudged the definition of recession on Wikipedia to no longer be 2 consecutive quarters of negative GDP growth. And this was a Monday, and it happened over the weekend. I mentioned it, and all hell broke loose. It had already broken loose over the weekend. And then obviously anything Joe touches gets amplified to the high heavens. And you're like, okay, so the definitions that we use, I think Shapiro calls it semantic overload. That's the battleground. Ultimately, almost all...
Tell me the frame, and I'll tell you the argument. Like somebody will say, is it worth stopping Donald Trump by suppressing stories? Yes or no? Go. I was like, well, first of all, the question was designed to subsume that we have to stop Donald Trump. I might agree with that. I believe maybe we should stop Donald Trump. But you did make that the argument, and then you piled on a question on top of it, and you subsume that within the frame. And so more or less, this is everything at the moment, which is if you can define misgendering and dead naming, you've won the argument.
Presupposes a world in which, So I'll give you an example for the fledgling podcasters out there. When you first start doing a podcast, you're nervous that the guest doesn't like you. You're nervous that the guest isn't interested in you, that your question sucks, that your question doesn't make sense, and you're terrified of silence, among millions of other things.
Did any of those happen in this episode?
Oh, you've been very welcoming. How could I not? After you serenaded me with your guitarlele. This episode is brought to you by a product I've used every single day for over 3 years now, and that is AG1. AG1 is a foundational nutrition supplement that covers whole body health. It is a staple part of my supplement regime. I take the travel packs with me when I'm on the road, like here in LA, and it really does make a massive difference, especially to my digestion. If your energy levels have been all over the place, if you really feel like you need to make an improvement to your nutrition, this is a fantastic place to start. It's been updated 52 times over the last decade and only uses the best ingredients at the highest quality to make sure that it covers all of your nutritional bases. There is a 90-day money-back guarantee. For 90 days, you can use Athletic Greens, and if you do not like it or are not satisfied with the results, they'll give you your money back. If you're looking for a simpler, effective investment for your health, try AG1 today by going to drinkag1.com/Modern Wisdom. You'll get a year's free supply of vitamin D, 5 free AG1 travel packs, plus that 90-day money-back guarantee. That's drinkag1.com/Modern Wisdom. Thank you very much for tuning in. If you enjoyed that clip with Eric, then press here for the full-length 3-hour episode. Go on. Press it.